And it's a pleasure to be here. I've been at a number of UISTs throughout the year, and sort of in the spirit of reflection, it seems like a lot of us are looking back at the past. I was thinking about the first UIST that I attended, and that was in 2005. The keynote speaker was Gary Starkweather, who's the inventor of the laser printer, so I feel honored to be up here, following that. And I was at the end of my graduate career at that time and came to participate in the doctoral consortium. I loved seeing the pictures of the people at the doctoral consortium and also the expansion to the summer school. I was wondering, how many people here have participated in a UIST doctoral consortium at some point? How many people were in this year's UIST doctoral consortium? How many people were in the 2005 doctoral consortium that I was at? And we've actually got two. Is Mary here too? Yep, and Mary. So it was actually a really small doctoral consortium, but both Shamsi and Mary and I were there, and I love that Mary is leading the doctoral consortium this year as well. And although none of the three of us were living in Seattle at the time, UIST 2005 was in Seattle, and we clearly loved it so much, and we loved each other so much, that we all moved back to Seattle and went to Microsoft Research. And I collaborate with them a lot now. I was looking, and I've authored over 20 papers with Mary and Shamsi collectively. And Mary and I wrote a book on collaborative search, and a lot of the work that I'm going to be talking about today about microproductivity is stuff that I've done with Shamsi. And another fun fact is that 2005 UIST, Patrick was general chair of that UIST as well. So those of you who are in the doctoral consortium this year, look around at the people you're with, because they're going to be part of your community for many years to come. So I want to take us back even further to not all the way back to 1967, but to about a decade before that. Because I want to look at a transition we've been undergoing that I don't think I fully understand yet. And I want to challenge all of us to put our collective minds on it. So think about the first time you saw the web. And if you're one of those doctoral students, you don't remember that. Pretty much anybody under 30 doesn't remember the first time they saw the web. But I remember I was down in some basement dungeon of a computer lab in my undergraduate institution, and this guy called me over and said, "Oh, look at this." And he showed me a web page in Lynx. And Lynx is a visual text-based browser. To get between URLs, you have to arrow key between the different links. And there aren't really images, and you have to hit return to follow a link. It's basically a pain in the butt. I thought it was really dumb. I thought Twitter was really dumb too, so it turns out if I think something's dumb, it's probably awesome. Fortunately, I actually didn't think the guy who showed me this was dumb, and I ended up marrying him and having 4 kids with him. And I love this picture. We look so little and cute. And, the internet was little and cute then, too. This is a picture of Microsoft Research's homepage in the mid-90s. This is ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine a corporation having a web page that looks like that now? And, it's because there weren't actually that many web pages at the time. There were only 27,000 websites in total in the entire World Wide Web. And almost none of them were commercial. Only 14% were .coms. The rest were educational and governmental. We're actually part of this unique community where as the web has expanded, it's sort of gone away from being focused on us, where it's gone to include more information from other people. You know, another thing you may actually remember that's common about websites at this time is not only were there not very many websites, most of the websites were under construction. You know, or they had the little like guy working with the shovel. You know, I think of signs like this as one of those things that really date you. You know, this and like the sound of a modem screeching come from a very small window in time. And there were only 16 million users of the internet, of the web at that time. That was less than 0.5% of the entire world's population, and that's changed drastically. I mean, 16 million, that's like the size of the population of Istanbul. It's small. And what changed my perspective about the web, well, part of it was actually just the user experience getting better. So we talked about how links was such a pain in the butt. You start to see visual browsers come into play. And so in 1994, this is Mosaic. And this is about a year before Microsoft is going to license Mosaic to be the precursor to the Internet Explorer. We're about a year before Netscape hit the scene. We're actually a number of years before Chrome is even conceived of. I mean, we're 4 years before Google exists. But there were search engines just starting to come into existence. And it's these search engines that really changed the experience of the web. I mean, I was so infatuated with being able to find stuff, it changed my perspective so much that I went and worked at InfoSeek for a number of years, and I did my doctoral thesis on how people search the web. Of course, search engines were really different at the time. Probably the thing that most people thought of as a search engine at the time wasn't actually a search engine. So Yahoo was a directory. What it meant was it had a bunch of static web pages that human editors put together of curated content from the web, and it surfaced those static pages in response to a query. There were some more traditional search engines, InfoSeek being one, but they were really small. I mean, you can see 54,000 pages where it was in the Lycos index. You can see, too, that InfoSeek's actually kind of copying the Yahoo directory structure. This is what I was doing when I was at InfoSeek in those early days, is we were trying to automatically create these same directory pages just like Yahoo manually created. And so we were using link analysis to try and figure that out. We were sort of a little early to figure out that we should be using that for search, but we were using it to create the directory. And you know, I was really excited about how search engines were going to become this oracle of all knowledge. And we'd be able to just ask anything and get an answer. And you know, we're kind of getting pretty close to that now. But I think I was wrong about what was exciting about web search engines. Because being able to find stuff, that's great, and I don't mean to disparage that. It's awesome. But the thing that was really impactful is this bottom number here. And this is the fact that this is from WebCrawler, which was the most popular search engine in 1994. It's the fact that WebCrawler was seeing 15,000 queries a day. Now, obviously, that number's puny. I think in 2017, Google saw 63,000 queries a second. So that's 4 times as many queries in 1 second as compared to a whole day. But the important thing is that number was showing how people were using the service. And that ability to see people use the service and respond and improve as a function of that, that's the shift that I think is really important right now, that has lots of implications, some of which are obvious, and some of which are not obvious, that we need to be thinking carefully about. So, you know, now the internet has billions of web pages, search engine indexes are ginormous, you know, but the important thing is that search engines are seeing trillions of queries, and online services are expanding, and pretty much all of our interactions with digital computing are in some way being mediated by the cloud. And you see this showing up in your services that we're using in many ways. Like, some of the most obvious is we just directly expose that. So if you're going to search for something, you can see the queries that people have searched for before as a guide. You know, another way that it shows up is more subtle. So you think of search engines as sort of generally a query and 10 blue links. You may not know, but search engines have spent an enormous amount of effort optimizing exactly what color blue that link is. They run A/B tests figuring out, oh, if we make it just a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, you're more likely to click on it, you're more likely to engage in our service. And getting that right is worth tens of millions of dollars. So there's a number of different ways that online services use your behavioral data, your interaction data, to improve the services. One is merely to understand how the service is being used. So in this case, Yahoo might have its set of directory pages that have been manually curated, and then it's because it's the mid-90s, they might notice there's a lot of queries coming up for Nirvana and decide they have to go create a page for Nirvana. That's just understanding how people are using the system and improving it. But because you get all of this data and it's real time, another way that it works is you can run experiments and you can A/B test and you can try things out. And this is what happened with the blue links, right? To figure out exactly the right thing. And then the last one is to actually feed the data directly into the system, where we show you the queries you're using. We perhaps re-rank search results based on what people have clicked on. And this is what's really enabling this current kind of AI thunderstorm, where everybody's trying to use data and learn and improve the services that we're doing. And so one of the things that has enabled this is the move to the cloud. It's this transition of having all this disparate information that used to be locked on individual computers, being able to aggregate lots and lots and lots of people at a scale that's unimaginable before. But it's not just that there's a growing number of people. There's also a growing number of sensors that we have in the environment. So I mentioned web search engines because they're just kind of one of these first sensors that we were using to understand how people are searching in different places. But nobody is more familiar with the notion than people in UIST about how the number of sensors is increasing, you know? And this is from our computers, to our mobile devices, to wearables, to robotics, to industrial IoT devices, to smart speakers, to our car. All of these become sensors that feed information into the cloud and allow us to learn more about the ways that people are interacting with things and support their behavior better. And at Microsoft, we like to refer to this sort of transition from traditional computing to a rich network of cloud and edge devices as the intelligent cloud and in the intelligent edge. And I'm kind of amused. So this is a canonical slide that we use at Microsoft when we're sort of talking about the infrastructure we're using to support this new wave of computing. And I was amused looking at the UIST logo that it kind of echoes it. I was wondering, Andy, did you have a hand in that? But so the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge is the infrastructure that Microsoft is building to support this. And we build this both to support our own first-party applications that you're familiar with, like Office or Windows or Skype, and to support third parties to be building on this rich network in a way that's secure and compliant and trustworthy. And what's interesting about this emerging infrastructure, this emerging intelligent cloud and intelligent edge, is that computing is becoming embedded into the fabric of everything. It's no longer just something that we go to a single place and do. Instead, it's impacting every piece of our work and our daily lives, every aspect of the economy, every aspect of society, all of it. All of it is being influenced by computing. And clearly at Microsoft, we understand this very well. You know, the company was built, as Bill Gates said in our original mission statement, to put a computer on every desk and in every home. But one of the weird things that now, in the era of the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge, is that this looks weird. Like, this is a weird mission statement. Because computing has become so deeply embedded that it's not the technology that's interesting. It's what it enables us to do. The computer is disappearing. And you can see this reflected in our current mission statement, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Now, the interesting thing is you'll notice there's nothing in there about what to take and where to place it. You know, the tech has become implicit. And this shift was foreshadowed nicely by Mark Weiser, who's considered the father of ubiquitous computing. And he was a chief scientist at Xerox PARC back in the 1980s. In 1991, he wrote an article for Scientific American that was titled The Computer for the 21st Century. And I think it captures really well where we are right now in 2018. So what Mark said was, he said, the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. And that future that Mark envisioned 30 years ago, that's here today. And all of this is being enabled by this rich network of sensors that we're building and the ability to understand the world and aggregate that at the cloud. And this is awesome. Except that there's a risk that we may not be using all of the data we collect in all of the ways we understand the world. We might be tuning to the wrong thing. I mean, did you know that people notice their phone is missing before they notice their wallet is missing? What's more, people notice their phone is missing before they notice their kid is missing. And that sounds ridiculous, but I'm pretty sure it would be true for me. And I have 4 very noisy kids. So we need to flip this around. If computing is going to be embedded in everything, it can't distract us. It has to help us engage with the things that matter to us. Now, we tend to think of the tools that we're building in active terms, right? We build tools to help people be more productive, or help people be more creative, or collaborate better, or be more organized, all to help people do more stuff. But if we really want to empower people to do the things that matter to them, instead of just doing more stuff, we have to think about the impact of the tools that we're building on their attention. Because our ability to do the things that matter rely on our ability to attend to them. Now, there are a number of ways that the industry uses technology to capture your attention. I mean, we've had years of doing this, of collecting data and doing A/B experiments and trying to figure out how to get you to engage with online services. And these are just some of the tricks that we know, things like notifications or variable rewards or infinite feeds where information never stops coming. All of those help engage you with what you're doing. But they're not always engaging you in the way that you want them to be. I mean, think of your phone. Your phone wasn't developed as a memory device. And yet, somewhere along the line, as each application on your phone used your engagement data to figure out how to engage you better, it started capturing your attention. So instead of connecting you to external people as it was intended, it actually started separating you from the people around you. And the need to focus on people's attention is clear. There's been a lot of great work at Microsoft Research and other places looking at this. I think of the work done by Shamsi Iqbal and Mary Sherwinski and Gloria Mark. And they have found that it takes 25 minutes for a person to reach full productivity. Essentially, it takes 25 minutes for you to get your attention fully engaged in the project that you're doing. And yet we're interrupted every 3 minutes. What's more, even when we're not being interrupted by external sources, we constantly self-interrupt, going to check email or Facebook. It's really amazing that we manage to get anything done. Imagine if you could focus your attention on the things that you wanted to. We certainly try to do this. We block time on our calendar. We take Facebook vacations. We set out-of-office messages in our email. In fact, 82% of people in the United States engage in some form of noise reduction behavior. And 1/3 of people have unplugged for their mental health. And there's an opportunity here for technology to be supporting us with this better. And we have some ways that we're kind of hacking and trying to get this going. One way is to turn your phone into grayscale, make things less exciting and less compelling. We also try blocking external content that might distract us. We sometimes try blocking not even just the content that we don't want to see, but all content. So we will block, we'll set our phone into airplane mode or turn off our routers periodically during the day as a way to protect our attention. A first step that we've taken at Microsoft is something called Focus Assist. And this is embedded in the operating system in Windows. And it's a way to turn off notifications and social media when you want to be doing focused work. And work that Shamsi and Gloria and Mary have done has shown that when you don't have access to these external distractions, you feel more productive and you get more things done. So theoretically, having this Focus Assist mode on would let you get more done. But I say theoretically because, the reason we're not able to focus on things isn't always technology's fault. We're going to spend, probably all of us in this room, we probably all spend, 8 hours a day in an office for 40 years of our life. Actually, I think in Germany, it seems like it's fewer, 37 hours. But you spend a certain number of hours in the office. But do you know how many hours you actually work during the day? 4 hours. And there's a really interesting opportunity for technology here. And I don't mean that there's an opportunity for technology to make you work 8 hours instead of 4 hours, because that would be not fun. And also, you can't concentrate for 8 hours. It's just too much. But there's an opportunity to try to figure out and direct those 4 hours so that you use them and you don't need to spend another 4 hours sitting around not being productive, trying to figure out those 4 hours that count. And that's the challenge. I mean, like I know as an example, sometimes I block an hour on my calendar to do some work. Like, let's say Mary has sent me a paper that she would like me to review, and I'll block an hour to get that done. But even if I manage to keep that hour blocked, and even if I manage to not get notifications during that hour, I typically won't review the paper like I'm supposed to. And that's not technology's fault, that's human nature. What if getting started to review that paper were as easy as checking social media? This is where we have the opportunity to not just be protecting people, building people a bubble to protect them from technology, protect them from the very thing we're building, but instead start actively directing people's attention so that they have superhuman powers of attention, so that we're able to attend to the things that matter to us better than we could otherwise. So one way to do this, for example, is we know that small tasks are easier to get started than big, hard tasks. This is work that Shamsi and I did with Carrie Kai when she was interning with us. So this paper that I mean to look at during the hour, I'm not going to do that. But if all I had to do was look at a comment on page 3 and reply to it, I'd probably do that. And once I look at the comment, I'd probably be willing to look at the text the comment points to. And once I look at the text the comment points to, I'd be willing to edit the section. And before you know it, I'm working on Mary's paper the way that I was supposed to be doing. And the research that we've been doing recently does exactly this. We call it microproductivity. And what we do with microproductivity is we algorithmically take large, complex tasks and break them down into small microtasks that are easy to do in a variety of different contexts. The basic idea here is sort of the dual of creating a protective bubble. In a protective bubble, you're trying to change the way you work so that you have good, long, focused periods of time to get things done. And that's important. But this, and with microproductivity, what we're doing is we're taking the task and we're breaking it down into small little pieces, fragmenting it so it fits in the fragmented way that we actually do work. And, I think Shamsi and I both like this research that we're doing because nothing fragments your life more than children, They're just sort of always there, always getting in the way. And, this is going to sound callous, but take it the right way. Just like you spend 8 hours at work and only 4 of them are productive, you can spend a lot of time with your kids, and only some of them are meaningful engagement. Some of it's just boring, especially with babies, like they sleep a lot. I remember when my first was born, he was colicky and he screamed all the time. And when he would fall asleep, it was awesome, but it was, until he was about a year, it was awesome when he slept. I mean, he's sweet, but the thing is, when he would fall asleep, I wouldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't because I was on call. And any second, I might need to put down what I was doing and switch my attention because he was what mattered the most. But I couldn't switch my attention. I couldn't get engaged in other things. So you know what I did? I played Angry Birds. I got to like level 7 million. And even if you don't have a baby, you probably play Angry Birds. Or if you're James Fogarty, you play Candy Crush. But we take all of this time playing with little bits of time. Think about the time that it's not just when your baby's sleeping. Think about the time that you spent waiting for this session to begin, or the time you spend waiting in line for coffee. All of these little bits of time add up to something real. People spend over half of their waking day consuming media. People spend over 200 million minutes a day playing Angry Birds. Imagine if we could take that time and use it productively. So J.K. Rowling says she wrote Harry Potter in 5 years, the first one. And that seems like a long time, right? But if we were able to use the time that people are spending playing Angry Birds to instead be writing productively, we could produce 30 copies of Harry Potter a day. Now, that sounds somewhat ridiculous, both because we don't need 30 Harry Potters a day, and also because it doesn't seem easy to do. And so actually, with the micro-productivity research that we've done, we've sort of chosen writing as an interesting first task to be engaging with. And writing is an interesting task to engage with because it's one that's common across many productivity scenarios. The same kinds of underlying activities involved in writing underlie other things. And because it seems like you can't do it in small chunks. If I told you you were going to write content in 30-second bursts instead of playing Angry Birds, you'd think I was crazy. So tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Shamsi's going to be talking about some work that we did along with Dan Liebling, looking at how we can help people edit documents from their mobile device. And editing a document, imagine trying to edit this document from your mobile device. It's ridiculous. You'd never do it. People never do it. We barely consume content like this on our mobile device, let alone try to edit it. And so Shamsi will talk about how we can turn that into a positive experience and make it better. We've also done a lot of work thinking not just about editing, but also new content generation, thinking about how we can help people write new content. And there we're actually borrowing approaches from crowdsourcing, where crowdsourcing can be used to break a task down into small pieces, and we break crowd tasks down into small pieces to farm them out to a bunch of different people. But the other thing you can do is break it down into small pieces and farm it out to yourself at different times. And so using the cascade approach that Lydia Chilton developed, we use that for the individual via self-sourcing and figure out how to generate new content. And then last year at UIST, just because we have to have some fun devices in here, we also looked at using a smartwatch for this, because once the tasks get down small enough, you can start thinking about new form factors as well to do that. All to think about the different ways that you might break the task of writing down. So with Michael Bernstein and Justin Cheng, we did some work looking at what's the difference between doing a task as a macro task via a micro task. And in order to study this in a controlled context, we didn't use anything as big as writing. We used a bunch of sort of common tasks for which there were some obvious ways to break down. So this is a task you might have seen before that's somewhat common in crowd contexts, which is to add up a bunch of items on a receipt. And as a macro task, we might just say, what's the total cost of all the items on this receipt? And when you take a micro-productivity approach, you would instead say, what is the cost of this item plus this next item, right? You just are going to go pairwise down the list. And we did this for a bunch of different tasks. We did it for sorting. Oh, this is just some. We did it for things like sorting and transcription, and we broke them down. And we had people do the task as a macro task and a micro task and compared what was happening in those two contexts. So the first thing we saw was that people prefer to work via micro tasks. It's easier. They like it better. The other thing that we saw was that microtasking led to fewer errors. And this kind of makes sense because a lot of the context is getting externalized, right? You're writing it down as you go along. And that's part of what makes it easier, makes it more fun to do, but it also is what makes it a little slower. So we saw that microtasking takes longer. It took longer for both our arithmetic task and our sorting task Didn't take longer for transcription. That's because transcription is actually somewhat just bound by the length of what you're transcribing. And so you can see overall, on average, microtasks took up a little over 2 minutes, and macro tasks took about 1 minute and 40 seconds. But the interesting thing is we're thinking about microproductivity and microtasks directly in the context of its impact on attention. And so when you look at doing the microtasks in attention-ridden environments, you see something interesting happen. So we actively interrupted people as they were doing the task with kind of simple mathematical questions, but that take some thinking. I don't just know this off the top of my head. I have to look, probably some of you do, but I have to think about it. And when we do this, we see, as you would expect, given a large body of literature, the interruptions cause people to slow down on the macro task. In the microtasking case, however, you see almost no impact, certainly not a significant impact, of interrupting a person in the context of microtasking as compared to when they're macrotasking. And this actually kind of makes sense, because you're not interrupting them. The task is full of task boundaries. You're just interleaving the different tasks. It gives you a natural way to transition the attention across the different things that a person is trying to do. And when Shamsi talks tomorrow about the writing editing system, it's looking at the same phenomena in a more complex environment of writing and watching. Has anybody ever seen the Annoying Orange videos on YouTube? If not, your homework before tomorrow morning's session is to go watch some Annoying Orange videos. They're annoying. But when you look at the process of editing a document with divided attention in sort of a multitasking context, again, this ability to transition attention is important. And likewise, also this work that I mentioned earlier with Carrie Kai that we did, looking at how easier tasks help you get started. I talked about how maybe you can just edit a comment or respond to a comment on page 3, and that'll help you do the rest of the document. Likewise, these small micro tasks are actually good ways to transition into the larger tasks that you're trying to do. Help transition that focus, and the 25 minutes that it takes, instead you can be doing something productive from the first minute and respond well if that interruption comes in at minute 3. And we actually tried to use this in sort of a fun context that I like, where we started taking these micro tasks and inserting them into places where people are already distracted. So we took a task where a person was trying to, get something where, you go to Facebook to take a break or see other things, and we put these tasks in there. And, you may think, oh, I don't really want work going into my break spaces, but this was in the context of work. And people would browse past the task while they were productively using Facebook as a break. You sort of just ignore them. We ignore ad content. We ignore all sorts of things online all the time. They'd browse past them. But then what you would find is when people get to that, that stage where you're like in Facebook and you're like, I really don't want to still be here, but you're browsing through it still. Like at that point, the tasks were super useful to help draw people back into the work that they were doing. Another way that's sort of interesting, once you start thinking about intentional transitions of people's attention, that I like, is thinking about how you can frame the context that a person comes at a task. So we're all familiar with the notion of the wisdom of the crowd, right? Where if I tried to guess the number of jelly beans in this jar, I'd get it wrong. But if everybody in this room tried to guess the number of jelly beans, we'd sort of collectively average out to the right answer. The interesting thing is you can start to replicate some of the wisdom of the crowd within yourself by looking at the jelly beans at different times of day or in different places or from different contexts. And more usefully, it's not some, You don't really care how many jelly beans are in the jar. You can think about the research problems that you're doing or the other things in different contexts, when you're at work, when you're at home, when you're in the shower. It's probably why we come up with so many good ideas in the shower. And one of the ways that we found was particularly useful for replicating the wisdom of the crowd is actually to put yourself in different roles and think about something from the perspective of another person. So if you're feeling stuck, you might want to think about a problem from the context of your advisor or of a student or of somebody in a different field than you, somebody in computer security or architecture, or somebody in some entirely different field, like physical architecture or biology. And in that way, you can kind of, on your own, bring the wisdom of the crowd into play for you. Another example of thinking about how to intentionally help people transition their attention that I like is some work we did with Alex Williams when he was interning with us. And here we were thinking not just of transitioning people's attention into a productive task, but transitioning people into breaks or restorative spaces. So I know when I get home at the end of the day at work, I walk into the house and my kids come running up to me and they're like, Mom, look what I did. I have something to tell you. And I can't deal with it. I'm like, no, just leave me alone for 5 minutes. And I would much rather be able to put down my work more easily and get home and engage with them. And so what we built was a conversational agent to help people during that process of transitioning from work and home to disengage successfully. And what we found was that by helping people disengage successfully, people worked less, they sent less emails and did less work in the evenings while they were home. But what's even more interesting is then they were more productive the next day at work. So that ability to transition both into work and out of work are important not only for our well-being and health, which obviously matter a lot, they're actually good for our productivity. So, in summary, we've looked at how behavioral data has really changed the way that we build applications in a way that directly impacts our attention, and that we're building for engagement. We're thinking about how we get people to attend to things, but we need to be thinking carefully about making sure that we are directing the attention in the way that is important. And you may think here in this room, you're like, well, I don't try to misuse people's attention in the applications I build. That's others. But it's not the case. Everything we build, everything we do impacts people's attention. We are engaged in this whether we like it or not. And we have to be thinking holistically, not just about what people do, but the externalities and how it's impacting the way that they're achieving their goals. And we've been exploring micro-productivity as a solution, and I think it's really fun. I'd love to see the kinds of things that you're exploring as well. And one of the things that I've been interested in lately also is thinking about metrics. Because one of the challenges is the issues we're having with attention just are coming from kind of a fundamental misalignment of metrics. We're trying to create engaging experiences, and that seems like a good thing. But it's just not a broad enough metric to capture all of the things that people really want. And so we need to be thinking about how do we help people understand their priorities and their goals and reflect that back and whether they're achieving that. And how do we help us as we build applications for people understand what those people's goals are and see whether we're achieving those. And even more broadly, when we think from a societal perspective, how do we create incentives that align what an application wants to do with the things that we're building, with what people want? And I think a lot of these are really interesting fundamental questions that are a challenge for us as we move forward. So as computing continues to become more embedded in the environment, I encourage you to think about how we can use this shift to refocus people on the things that matter. And that's everything but the technology. If you're interested in diving into any of this work that I have presented, there's a bunch of references that you can go look at. And I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Quite interesting points. Do we have questions? So if you don't have questions, I have a lot. So I think please stand up. There are microphones. Line up behind the microphones, and then we go left and right. So, yeah.
Hi, Daniel Ashbrook, University of Copenhagen. This is really cool. Of course, like most academics, I suffer from exactly the problems that you bring up. One of the things I'm curious about is if you found that these micro-tasks in the beginning actually help you load the context into your head. Because I can go and I can edit random paragraphs or sentences, but does that help me get the entire, say, structure of the document and what I'm working on and so on actually in my brain?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have direct evidence of that, but that's our hypothesis. Because when we've looked at people doing easy tasks and then moving on to harder tasks, what we found is if they're doing it on the same content, they have a much easier time with that transition onto the harder task. So it's like, you know, editing that comment helps me then edit that section. It doesn't necessarily help me go do something else. It's, you know, there is some piece actually of like if the tasks are going to be the same, there's value to change same types of tasks. But it's basically, it's all about context loading. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Takeo from Tokyo. So my question is, what's the relationship between your work and microtask crowdsourcing? You know, in your talk, I think you divide your own work into microtasks and do it by yourself. And microtask crowdsourcing usually divide your own work and ask somebody else to work on it. So what's a common thing and what's some difference or what's the relationship?
Yeah, now, so I think that's a really great question in that what happens once you've divided a task is it sort of becomes fundamentally shareable too. And there becomes this opportunity to do some task arbitrage according to whom, you know, who's an expert at a task or how much you want to do the task versus not. So we've looked at ways to incorporate the crowd. WhereWrite, which does writing from a watch, actually uses crowd workers at a computer plus you at a watch to help create content. I think there's a fundamental shift that's useful for all of us to think about in thinking about doing the crowd work ourselves in some ways, and that's one of the things I like about micro-productivity. You know, we tend to think very much like, what does it mean to farm out tasks to other people? But it forces us to think about, like, what does it mean to work this way? And what are the values and what are not? I also really like the low overhead collaboration that it affords. So we've written documents using microtasks in a way that allows really deep collaboration. So this isn't with the crowd. This might just be with our coworkers. Shamsi and I wrote a discussion section of a paper this way, for example. And one of the things that's really cool is normally it would be I would draft the discussion section and then she'd go over it. But instead, because all of the pieces were kind of disaggregated, we saw different ideas that we have come together in, you know, individual paragraphs. And I thought that was a pretty fun piece.
Hello. Hi, Jaime.
Hi.
It was a great talk. I'm really impressed to see, like, if I can microtask, how productive I would be. So I have a question in the other context, like, say, for example, in 10 years, everyone started doing microtasking. So what are the consequences you can think of, like, that you don't want to see in 10 years if everyone starts doing microtasking?
Yeah. And I hope that microtasking is never the only way that we work. It's more of a complement to the other kinds of work. And I think it relates to this question about building context as well. A lot of, and actually it relates to the crowd question too, because there are differences about doing your own task in that you have context. I don't know that I think they're inherently different, too. In some ways, when you're working in a deep, focused manner, you're just doing a bunch of smaller tasks, but you've got a ton of context swapped in. And the important thing is, and this is true, this is true for microtasking, and this is true when we think about automation in general. I think the important thing is to be thinking about, it's these rich connections that we're able to make that are really interesting places where we can provide value. And some of that may be in small tasks, some of that may be by focus work. I think we need to make sure that we're thinking very much about how people are providing what's unique and what's special.
So is there anything, like if you take Angry Bird totally out of your lifestyle, will there be any bad effect? Like, do you think Angry Bird actually helps you in some way? That's why you keep playing?
Oh yeah, and I probably wasn't clear enough about this. I don't think that the goal is to fill all of your waking moments with something productive. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to clarify that, because that's terrible. It's a terrible use of our attention. There are restorative things, and Angry Birds and checking Facebook and all of those things are restorative. The challenge is to use them in a way that's restorative, and not in a way that's sort of addictive or overly engaging. And I think that's the really important thing. And that's why I ended with the work with Alex Williams, where we're thinking not just about how we can help people transition into work, but transition into restorative contexts. And I very much think that's useful. Help me actively engage with what's important to me, whether that's work or meditating or anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Kaveh Bazargan, ACM SIGCHI Iran chapter. Thank you for your wonderful talk. So it's clear that we are living at the age of the attention economy. All the products, services, platforms, ecosystems are competing for our attention. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you said that it's very important that we reconsider the metrics and the KPIs. I'm a user researcher, so I do a lot of, all sorts of analytics, and I'm totally aware. I was just wondering, what are the sorts of KPIs you would recommend us to consider? Because in the new Code of Professional Ethics of ACM 2018, what you have raised has been also raised, and the social responsibility of the designers and all the players. But unfortunately, when you talk to students, they want to make money, so they want people to engage, and they want to be competing with others. What is your concrete recommendation for practitioners, teachers, and just human beings? What can we do? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I'm partly raising this as a challenge. It's something that took me a long. I didn't engage in the notion of metrics for a long time, and I think it's such an important, interesting question. And I would say even beyond metrics, and there, it's really thinking about what are the metrics? What are long-term? We're just a little short-term in our metrics right now. How do we capture a longer-term value? Not necessarily how long you're spending in a particular application, but how much you're accomplishing, what you want. And I don't know how to capture that. You're starting to see organizations use not just engagement, but quality engagement as an attempt to try to do this. And I think it's not just a metrics question, though. I think it's very much a business model question as well. And we need to be thinking about, you talk about students wanting to make money. I mean, that's the world wants to make money, and to not acknowledge that is to ignore important things. And we need to think about, how do we create models where people are paying for what they want in a successful way?
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry I didn't have a better, a concrete answer.
Hi, Nella Rourke from Northwestern University. I really appreciate bringing up this really beautiful idea of us kind of working to align the incentives of applications more directly with people's goals, and something I'm really excited for the community to think about. One thing that I think is really challenging about this is that people come to applications with really diverse goals. Mm-hmm. And having worked in the kind of MOOC space, we all thought, oh, everyone's going to come to MOOCs to learn this full course content, and that wasn't the case at all. And so I was wondering how you think about how these applications might be able to align with different goals that people are bringing to them, and whether this is something that can be fully automatable, or if there's some kind of mixed initiative kind of combination between people stating what their goals are as they come into an application and working to create microtasks around that.
Yeah, no, I do think we need to be able to get, I mean, like one of the cool things about search, and the reason I think search was sort of an early thing here, is you actually get an explicit statement of intent. And that's kind of cool. And like we train people to misstate their intent a little bit because we translate it into small keywords and things, but you get an explicit statement of intent. And I think the more we can think about how we capture people's intent, the better. It's actually one of the things that I also sometimes gloss over when talking about micro-productivity, is that a lot of these microtasks can be meta-microtasks. They're not just doing the work, but they're thinking about how you prioritize, how you have intent, and I think that's an important part of the conversation, is how do I continually reprioritize and think about what I want. And then we need ways to reflect on, and that's where the metrics come into play, is ways to reflect on how I can understand that and whether I'm achieving that, because I don't always know what I want either, But, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, one and the last one.
Hi, my name's Kristen. You talked about this briefly, and I was just curious. You had worked on this conversational agent to help people disengage from work and to actually use that time as when they're home is more restorative. And my curiosity is just understanding, what was that conversational agent like? What kinds of considerations went into creating that? What did you find?
It's actually, it's kind of ridiculously simple. So you could implement it in your own life if you wanted. So we can all take advantage of this right now. It was we explored a couple of different structured conversations that sort of at the end of the day, and we had two different hypotheses. One was that you're leaving work and you've got a lot of to-dos on your mind, and so just let you offload all of your to-dos in a way that you can then surface what you want to do the next morning. And that's actually kind of useful for figuring out what you want to do the next morning, and probably has some value. Certainly has some value. The conversation that I think was sort of more interesting was one that was more focused on your goals and your priorities. And so as you're heading home, thinking about what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And did what you do today take you closer to those goals? And that kind of popping out, actually coming back to a little bit of the meta level there, actually goes nicely. They fit together. Popping up onto that meta level helped people disengage better and figure out where they wanted to go. So a good practice is maybe at the end of the day, think about what are my long-term goals and did I actually manage to achieve them in the things that I did today. So.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Let's give a big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Jamie will be around